I have this old platform scale. I don't know anything about the history of it. I'm going to inspect it to make sure I think it'll work properly, and then I'm going to calibrate it to make it into a good functioning scale. I chose this one out of my pile because it's the most common style of scale, with the single sliding weight on a 50-pound beam and a hanger to stack additional weights. I made a video about this type of scale a few years ago, in January of 2021. I showed a few examples of different scales, and I showed some stick diagrams to illustrate the concept of how they work. I'm not going to do any of that this time, so you should watch my other video if you want a better understanding of how they work. I'll put a link below in the description. Here's a look at the back side of this one. It's got pretty skinny wheels compared to most of them. Here's the fine adjustment weight. It screws back and forth on the threaded rod like it's supposed to, so that should work okay. I can press on the platform and work the beam up and down, so it has all the proper connections in it. I should be able to bump this platform back and forth here to find the frame, and then leave it rest in the middle of the travel so it's not touching the frame. The same for this end. I'll bump it back and forth and leave it rest in the middle of the travel. In the long ways direction, I do the same test, but I keep it square now, just move it long ways. So that feels good there. Looking at the top part, I'm going to center this stuff up. These parts can move around a lot while you're rolling the scale on the floor, so you always want to check that before trying to use it. Nothing should be rubbing anywhere. Everything has to hang and move easily so it can find its balance point. This adjuster is close to the right range because I can move it one way and the beam goes to the bottom of its travel. And if I move it the other way, the beam goes to the top of its travel. Somewhere in between those 2 points, I should be able to get the beam to balance in the center of its travel. About like that. So that all looks okay. Let's put something on here to weigh. This is a 50-pound weight. A 50-pound weight works well because this is a 50-pound beam. The last number on the right is 50. So if I slide this weight from the 0 to the 50, it should balance out the beam. But it don't, so that's way off. Something's not right there. So I'm going to do a different test. This smallest weight here says 50 on it, because it should offset 50 pounds on the platform. It also says a half a pound on it, because that's what it weighs. That actually comes close to balancing there, so that's good. That means the ratio of all of the balancing parts here is pretty close to being where it should be. It's a 100-to-1 balance ratio. So when I have a half pound of weight here, which is 0.5 pounds, it should balance when there's 100 times that much, or 50 pounds, on the platform. That's better than I expected so far. So this little sliding weight is the biggest problem. I just proved that the balance ratio was close by using the static half-pound weight to balance the 50-pound weight. I don't want to change any of those parts yet. I want to make the change to this sliding weight to get it within range to work with the rest of the parts. Frequently, these weights have a thumb screw on the bottom so you can lock the weight in position. This one has a threaded hole in the bottom, so I expect the thumb screw's missing, and that's why it don't balance anymore. I found a bolt to fit that threaded hole, and I stacked washers on it till the beam came close to balancing just above center, because that's where the beam balanced with the half-pound weight on the hanger. When this lock screw is the right weight, the sliding weight at the 50 mark should balance at about the same position as the half-pound weight on the hanger. The beam is tapered, so the lock screw must be out farther to slide this weight to the other end. The final locking screw will need a few more threads, because this one bottoms out before it locks the weight to the beam on the other end. So I'll have to make a nice looking locking screw with a few more threads exposed, and it needs to weigh the same as that bolt and washers there. This is looking good so far. Now the static half-pound weight gets the beam to balance close to the same place as the movable weight at the 50 mark. Now I'm satisfied I can make this thing work properly. So far I've been saying things like this is within range and that's pretty close, but that's not going to cut it for a scale. So everything from here on will be to make it work accurately. First I'll start with this pile of weights. They need to weigh what they say they do. These are all rusty and dirty, so they'll weigh less after I clean them. This postal scale is the most accurate thing I have at the moment, so that's what I'm going to use. Now they're all clean. These weights almost always have some holes on the underside, so I'm going to put little washers in the holes until they weigh what they're supposed to. That washer is the right amount of weight, but it won't fit into the little holes there. Here's some tiny washers, but that's not enough. I wonder if one tiny washer puts it overweight. Nope. So I need some washers between those sizes to try. I'm thinking these two smaller washers should be about what that big one weighs. But that's not enough. It takes 3 now. That don't seem right. I'm gonna try the original washer again. It's not enough now. If I put the small one on there, that's not enough. Okay, it's not reading like it used to, so time to recalibrate. I forgot it's pretty cold out today. I just brought this scale from inside the house, so I need to recalibrate it, because things change as it's cooling down. Okay, now it looks good with the original washer. So here's my 2 smaller washers again. And that looks good. Maybe I'll put one in each hole. I can add one of these tiny ones here and it don't change. And that's good because I'll be using some epoxy, so maybe that won't put it overweight. That little one sticks up above flush in that small divot. Maybe I'll put them both in one hole. That sticks out a little less. I'm going with that. Here's the 1 pound weight. It's 2/10 of an ounce off. I'm going to recalibrate the scale more often now to make sure it's working right. That looks good there. I can add 2 small washers to simulate the weight of the epoxy and it still don't go overweight. That one's 2 pounds already, so that's good. This one needs a little bit. 1 washer does it. And 2 small washers to simulate the epoxy weight. Don't put it overweight, so that's good. This one's 2 pounds already. And this one's 2 pounds already. I have some 2-part epoxy here, so I'll mix that up. And I'll just glue the washers in there. Now I'll do a final check on them. And they all look okay. This is slow setting epoxy, so I'm going to let it sit overnight. Here's the 3 weights after the epoxy hardened. Now all the weights are good. I'm going to set this up to weigh something. Make sure the platform's not bound up. Make sure the sliding weight's all the way to the left. Now I need to zero out the scale, so I'm going to move this hidden counterweight to get the beam to balance in the center of the window. That looks good there. So now I'll put the 50-pound weight on the platform. And I'll put the half-pound weight on the hanger. If everything was perfect, the beam would be in the center of the window, but it's not. It's quite a bit above center. The problem is the length of the arms that make up this balancing system are not the exact length they need to be for a true 100:1 ratio. So I need to adjust the length of an arm somewhere. Most of the scales made a provision for that, and it's under the platform where nobody ever sees it. Some of the more inexpensive scales had no adjustment on them. They have to be calibrated by adjusting each weight to the balance ratio of the scale instead of adjusting the scale to a known weight. So I need to get this platform off of here. Frequently they made them so this wood has to come off first. So I'm going to work on that. The first screw was hard to get out. I couldn't get it with a big screwdriver. I had to go to the impact driver. That got it to start turning, but I still couldn't get it out. So I gave up on that. The others all came out with the big screwdriver. These bars just lay in there, and they're supposed to keep the platform centered in the frame. That's why you need to get the wood off. These arms are trapped down by the wood. This end of these two arms are riveted in place, so that don't come apart. This plate's bent up, maybe from me lifting the platform to look under it. I'm going to force this board off of here. The screw's already stripped. These screws go into small blocks of wood that are trapped in the casting, and they can be replaced. After these arms are removed, the platform can be lifted off. All this stuff hangs on chain links in there. Under this end is the adjustment part. There's two screws in there. One pushes and one pulls. The lower one is a set screw that pushes on this little casting. The one up inside there is a bolt. It threads through the little casting and pulls on it. There's a bunch of rust in there. This is the link that goes up and pulls on the beam. The chain link hangs on a pin. On some scales, the pins just lay in a groove. On this scale, one end of the pin's bent over and goes into a hole in the casting. I'll have to work on it to get it out of there. There's a lot of dirt collected on top of this part. I cleaned this part off camera. First I picked the chunks out with a screwdriver. Then I used a wire wheel on a drill. Now I have some PB blaster penetrating fluid on there, and I'm going to take it apart. I'm taking all this apart to clean it and make sure it's going to work right. After the junk's cleaned out, these parts fit together like this. The link that pulls down on the balance beam hooks in the middle of this part, and that amount of travel right there is all the adjustment you have. It's surprising how much difference that makes. I took all this apart to clean it. There's a pin in each corner that the links hang on. Each one of these triangle castings has some pins pressed in it, and I wire brushed the angled side of each pin. One pin hangs in the chain link, and the other pin supports the platform. Nothing touches the rounded part, just where the angled edge is. And there's a pin down in here that the center round link hangs on. The side that rides inside of the round link needs to be cleaned. Same thing on this bigger casting. Clean the 2 pins in each corner. This link on the end. And I forgot to show the hook in the middle where the round link hangs. It needs cleaned too. Here's a problem I found. These 4 pins should be the same shape. This S-shaped one is bent from excess force. It was down in this casting, and the weight on the link pulling down bent that pin like that. That's the worst one. All of them need to be straightened. Here's what they look like now. The straight part needs to be straight, but also the angled part has to be at the right angle or it won't sit down in the casting. Make sure the pin's touching the casting on both ends. Okay, I'm going to put it all back together. This platform has 2 short legs and 2 longer legs, because the angled pins in the rear are lower than the angled pins in the front. Those 4 pieces hold the platform in the middle so it don't touch the frame. These boards had expanded lengthwise to where they didn't fit down in there properly, so I sanded off the ends to make them fit again. I'm not going to screw them down yet. They can just lay in there for what I'm doing. Now I'm going to set it up to weigh something again. Make sure the platform's centered in its travel. Make sure the weight is all the way to the left. Make sure everything is hanging properly and looks like it's centered. Now the beam is resting at the downward limit. I can get it to balance out, but the zeroing weight is near the end of its travel. That's because I removed some dirt and some rust, and sanded off some wood, took out the screws, and all that weighs something, so now it balances differently. Well, there's more to do here to get this scale accurate, so it's going to have to be a multi-part series. I want to cover everything somebody might want to know to fix their own scale properly. And it seems like I'm just getting started. So make sure you come back for the next part. Alright, that's it.